How's it going, YouTube? Coming soon today with another video, and today, guys, I'm going to bring you my YCS Niagara Falls experience. Honestly, it was a ton of fun, such a blast being able to hang out with so many different people and meet more of my subscribers, and then also hang out with all those other content creators that you'll see here in the next slide, which was a ton of fun as well. I did not play Striker for this weekend. I did play Danger Tearlament. That deck was a ton of fun, very explosive, being able to go ahead and dump things like Spell Canceller off of Curious, and then bring it back turn 1, or go for Dweller turn 1. Most of my matchups were the mirror match, so that's something that going Dweller turn 1 was pretty insane, almost an immediate game ender, especially because most people were not on Imperm or Gamma, and even if they were on Imperm, you always just make the Dweller underneath an Elf, so the Imperm never really mattered. And the second that the Dweller resolves, you would just kind of auto win. Honestly, it's pretty crazy. That card is nuts. So for the weekend, it was a lot of fun being able to play a lot of those mirror matches. Honestly, the mirror match feels a lot like a Striker mirror match, which is really cool. It's just all about resources and how much you can keep in your side of the board, and then being able to know what you have to spend with things like Kaleido. Like, there was a moment that I won because I forced my opponent to use Snow on me because I was trying to like go for game, and then in main phase 2 I used Kaleido to go ahead and spin the Snow back to the deck, so that if my opponent didn't have access to it for the next turn, I could just go for the kill shot then. And that really did matter, because not having that in the graveyard meant I didn't have to keep dealing with it, so that was really cool too. On the follow-up turn, I used Soliek to go ahead and bring back out my Kaleido and then spin away their Kaleido. And so there's a lot of different things that you really got to keep track of in that matchup. But in the mirror match, it's just all about who can use Kaleido more. Honestly, that card's insane. That's so good. And if you establish Soliek, you pretty much get the game right there too. That card's really nuts as well. But we'll talk about all that and more too, because I really did love playing the deck, and I will be playing it moving forward. I did borrow the whole deck. I did just get my own field spells, so I will be picking up the rest of the deck soon as well. If you haven't already checked out my sponsors though, over at Imperium Duelist, Dragon Shield, or Gem, definitely go ahead and check them all out. Without further ado, let's hop right on into the video. So the first thing I wanted to bring up is going to be hanging out with all the other content creators. Honestly, big shout out to all of you guys. It was just so much fun. Crush Cards, Ruggles, Pack, Gage, Dan, Milano, and my friend Tyler in the background there. We hung out for the whole weekend too. It was a lot of fun, honestly. Just such a blast. All the different things that you can do in Niagara Falls was super cool. And then seeing the falls themselves was really such an experience as well. Such a great time. Thank you for everyone making this weekend so special. Talking about what the weekend really entailed though, was there was a lot of hand traps versus very little board breakers that I saw this weekend, which was really interesting because a lot of people were really expecting a lot of board breakers. But you got to realize, every single time that there's a format where you deem that there's going to be many board breakers at an event, it's almost always correct to just go ahead and run hand traps at that point then, because a lot of strategies are really just trying to use most of their hand to just break the board, and then go into using combo with very minimal cards. So the second that you have like a well-timed Ash or Imperm, it can be very impactful. Also, cards like Nibiru onto the tier N board, where most of it now is like IP, Elf, Spell Canceller, really impactful. Honestly, I really like Nibiru for that as well. But there were a lot of hand traps this weekend. That's something that you really had to make sure that you were prepared for. There was a game that I did get like Ash Imperm crowed, so it's definitely unfortunate, but those hand traps can be very strong, and you got to make sure that you're on those. Honestly, my board breakers really didn't feel that strong this weekend. The only one that really went crazy was Super Poly, but even Dark Ruler in my main deck was something that didn't really do a whole lot, especially against the mirror match. Is pretty mid. It's just something that I don't really like to use, so it came out quite a bit. But other than that, the card's pretty okay, but hand traps were definitely the play, and I think that they will be moving forward. So the next thing I want to talk about is tier versus Spright. The top 8, 50% of the top 8 was tier. Most of the combination decks that we saw were Danger Spright tier, Punk, or Danger Spright tier. Both are really strong, but I do think that if you are going to play Spright, you should be playing some kind of variation and not just pure. And then also, if you're playing tier, playing the Danger variant is usually just a lot better in my eyes. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. But the tier deck definitely went over top of the Spright deck this weekend, and it just really shows how strong tier is right now before any of the support, honestly, which is really crazy. And the next set we get Lulu, which that card is insane. Honestly, just being, I believe it's a Solemn Warning, is just nuts. It's just such a good card. And then also the deck is just getting more and more support in the future too. So this deck is really crazy, and I think that it just really does outshine Spright at the moment. The next thing here is going to be talking about Striker and why I didn't play Striker this weekend. I think that's very apparent when cards like Canceller and Eradicator are in the format. Both of these cards are very strong, especially Game 3, Round 1 against ABC Therion. I put up Canceller underneath my Elf, and if you're playing ABC and you don't have field spell, it's going to be a rough time. So my opponent top decked an Imperm for turn, going second, and then it was just kind of a GG moment. They extended the handshake because the fact that I had the Cancer underneath the Elf, so they couldn't go ahead and Imperm the Canceller. So this card is just another one of those things where if you have the protection for it on your board, it's just really hard to lose, especially against those matchups like Striker and ABC. So that's one thing that you really got to realize, that playing a deck like Striker, you have to main deck cards like Nibiru to go ahead and clear the board when they put up the Canceller. You have to have cards like Imperm in your main deck so you can try and Imperm the Canceller. There are certain cards that you just really have to make sure that you are prepared for. It's really hard to play around cards like Eradicator, almost impossible. That card is just really nuts, and the fact that that's something that's in the format right now is pretty hard to deal with. So again, playing Striker and having cards like these in the format is just really hard to try and play this deck when these are very prominent in everyone's main deck that is playing Tier, and Tier was the most prominent deck in the room. That's another reason why we didn't see any pure Mystic Mind decks or pure Runic decks. Both of those are very strong in their own regard, but at the same point, when you have a card like Canceller on the board, those cards really don't matter. Moving forward, though, I do want to talk for a moment about Danger Tier versus the Branded and High Spirits Tier. I think Branded and High Spirits Tier is really cool, and you definitely get a lot of free resources off of this build. I think that's really neat, too. The fact that the one card just turns into your Kit Close as well is really good, but at the same point, I feel like the Danger variant is just so much better because you get a lot of free draws off the Dangers. You get cards like Nessie, that's a Dark Aqua, so you can go ahead and make your kit, or a Garura, which is really strong, too. Being able to mill Nessies and then go ahead and not use my Tiers in the graveyard and just use like the Nessies so I can use those for like a Kaleido Heart later on was really strong. Then also just having the ability to go into things like Curious, a lot more links like the Elf and the IP. It just honestly, just for me, just did so much more, because you also can have the awkward situations where you don't have field spells, so you can't use Kit to be attributed for the Eradicator. So you just summon out like Bigfoot, and then you tribute the Bigfoot for the Eradicator. So that's also just really strong too if your Jackalope gets like sniped out of your hand too. And it also just really helps you go for game a lot better. They put a lot of damage on board. There's also a game, it was again round 1, but it was game 1. My opponent set 2 passed under Rivalry, and I had a Jackalope on the board, and I just kept revealing Bigfoot until my Bigfoot got hit, popped the Rivalry, and then hit for 9k. So that was pretty crazy. But the Dangers just add such a higher ceiling to the deck that I couldn't imagine playing the deck without them. My list for the YCS Niagara was honestly really cool. A couple cards that I would cut for sure was going to be the Dark Ruler in main deck. I feel like Dark Ruler is just very average right now. I think in my sideboard, I'd rather just play Droplet over maining the Dark Ruler because I just want to have an answer for Dweller. You can also sideboard cards like Gamma or Imperm, but if you get hit by Dweller, you just auto-lose, which is really unfortunate. That's why I had the Mystic Mind, though. I did get Dwellered one game and then mined my opponent and just won from there. Which was pretty interesting. I was able to clear the Dweller and then go ahead and activate the Perlerino instead, and then go just completely off and be able to OTK my opponent there. But that was something that was really nice to have as well. It's kind of the same reasoning where if you're going to get Scythe Locked anyways, you might as well have the card like mine to go ahead and out the Scythe Lock, where you can at least go ahead and not just die to being Scythe Locked, right? So that's really nice too. I really didn't like having a pointer in my sideboard. Every single time that I pointered, it just felt really mid. My opponent's hand was always just so good, where it just really didn't feel like it was that impactful. But other than that, the Eradicator and the Spell Cancer in my main deck both would honestly come out as well. Both felt very win more over the weekend, something that I really didn't even need. Maybe we can sideboard the Eradicator, but like even the Spell Cancer was just like, okay. It won me a couple games, but other than that, I felt like just the deck itself had so much gas that it just never really mattered to have those cards in the list. Cards like Super Poly went really crazy, Desires went super crazy. A lot of people were curious to know if Desires was the correct build for this, but I think that playing Desires just says draw 2, and it's nuts. If you open it in your starting hand, you should just go ahead and rip it right away to see all of your options in your hand. And honestly, every single time that I did that and I saw like more Dangers or I saw like a Super Poly, and I just knew that it was over from there. I know there was one time I Desires, I drew the Galaxy Cyclone, I like popped one of my opponent's set back row as a Super Poly, and then I was able to just go completely off. It was pretty nice. So definitely being able to draw 2 is always good. The rest of the deck, though, having the dangers the way that they are, the double Bigfoot, I thought that was really smart too. Shouts to Cody for that one. Honestly, just such a big monster in the first place. And again, the thing with Eradicator, being able to just go ahead and tribute that off is really nice. Having the cards like Chupacabra for the free reborn, just another 4 is really cool too. I was playing through Mothman, but I didn't really want to give my opponent the advantage to go ahead and just like, pitch a tier. But it was also kind of nice. There was one moment where I pitched a Mothman, and then my opponent pitched a Nessie off of it, and I was like, oh, cool, mirror match, and then made Dweller. So like at that point, it's pretty nice too. So you kind of have to think about it both ways, where if you do Mothman and they get some kind of playoff, it can be really impactful, but at the same point, you get the information to know if you need a Dweller or Canceller. So it was really cool both ways. But at the same point, the sideboard, again, I probably would just cut the appointers. It wasn't really that strong. I still would probably play the Dugaris over Redoer moving forward. I think Dugaris was just really strong all weekend. Also, being able to go Dugaris, target these Zeroboros to double it was pretty crazy. It's just like the Redoer to me doesn't really do a whole lot. The fact that you confuse on your opponent's turn, it's the same thing as just going Elf, Chainlink 1, Chainlink 2, IP, go Bomber, and then summon back the Merly, Chainlink 2, Mill 3, and then Bomber blow it up, Chainlink 1. Get a free fusion and a mill 3. So it's just like better in my opinion. Or you can do the same thing with like Zeroboros and just mill 3 off the Merely. So like there's still a couple things that you can do there. You can also just utilize the Eradicator to go ahead, like I said earlier, and like call the evenly out of your opponent's hand, hopefully if they call Battle Phase on you. So that's really cool too. You can set up your board for things like Dark Ruler. If you have the Soliac play where you have Elf on your board, you can go just activate Soliac even if you don't have a tier on your board, because it's just activating a continuous trap. You're not using the effect. And then you chain the Elf and you summon back Merly. The Dark Ruler resolves, and now you have Soliac set up, so if they summon anything, you can just go ahead and fuse immediately. So that's really cool too. I like that a lot. There's definitely a lot of different options you can do to play around certain side cards in this build, which I think is really smart. Crime in the side was honestly crazy. They came in so many times, and it was just so good every single time. The next thing I want to talk about, though, is going to be all these cards are probably going to end up going to 1. Swap Prog, the Nessie, and the Super Poly. I think all these are justifiably going to go to 1, potentially. Especially Nessie being a Dark Aqua is just so crazy. It's just so free. I don't think that card's staying at 3 at all. Definitely let me know what you think down in the comments below, because I think these are definitely going to be interesting ones to see on the ban list if we do. But I hope that you all enjoyed this video. If you haven't already joined my Discord, Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, definitely go ahead and do so. If you want a coaching session over at Metafy, feel free to PM me on Discord if you have any questions, and I hope that everyone has a wonderful night. I'll catch you all in the next video. Thank you.